The message arrived in the dead of night, a pulse of ultraviolet light encoded with an ultimatum. It bypassed satellites, forced its way through quantum relays, and manifested on every major broadcast screen across Earth. The image? A fleet. Vast. Unfathomable. Thousands of jagged black vessels eclipsing the stars, their hulls reflecting no light, their silhouettes swallowing entire constellations. Then came the voice. It was synthetic, guttural, and utterly devoid of warmth. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Orzak Dominion. Your leaders have 5 planetary cycles to submit, or we will raise your world to compliance. Tribute is mandatory. Your strongest warriors, your brightest minds, and 5% of your planetary resources will be surrendered annually. Attempt resistance and we will make an example of your planet, just as we have done before. Your compliance ensures survival. Your defiance guarantees extinction. The feed cut. For a moment Earth stood still. No one moved. No one spoke. The ultimatum was clear. The galaxy's apex predators had chosen Earth as their next conquest. Then, inside a dimly lit war room in Geneva, one man broke the silence. Admiral Ethan Graves leaned back in his chair, exhaling a slow breath. His cybernetic fingers drummed against the steel table as he replayed the message, analyzing every detail. Around him sat the best minds of Earth's military, intelligence, and technological branches. Some looked shaken. Others uncertain. Ethan? He smirked. All right, he said. Who wants to tell them? A few wary glances flickered his way. President Vasquez adjusted her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. Tell them what, Admiral? That we don't do ransom payments. A murmur swept through the room. One general cleared his throat. Sir, we are talking about an empire that has subjugated hundreds of worlds. Their fleet is big, scary, heavily armed. Ethan's smirk widened. And utterly unprepared for what happens when you back a human into a corner. A chuckle came from the corner of the room. Captain Helena Drake, head of the Terran Black Ops Division, leaned forward with an almost predatory grin. You know, Admiral, I was getting bored. When do we start? Ethan glanced at Vasquez. Madam President? She sighed, rubbed her temples, then exhaled. Make it clear, Admiral. Ethan turned toward the holocamera broadcasting directly to the Orzak. His eyes gleamed. His next words would echo across the galaxy. Dear aliens, we don't do ransom payments. The Orzak response. The Dominion had heard countless refusals before. They had shattered fleets, silenced civilizations, and turned proud species into nothing more than footnotes in history. But Earth's response? That was new. On board the command bridge of the dreadnought Zarvok, High Warlord Zovok brooded in his throne, claws tapping against the armrests. His 8 crimson eyes flickered as he replayed the human's response for the 5th time. His subordinates stood at attention, awaiting orders. The silence was suffocating. At last Zovok spoke. Launch the first wave. No survivors. With a single command, the Orzak fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of death set to crash against Earth's defenses. They believed humanity had just signed its death warrant. They had no idea what was coming. Earth prepares for war. The countdown to war had begun. On Earth, bunkers sealed. Orbital defenses powered up. Every major space station activated emergency protocols. But while civilians prepared to endure, the military prepared to fight. And fight dirty. Inside the Valkyrie, Earth's top-of-the-line battleship, Ethan Graves stood on the bridge, watching as the Dominion's armada approached. He wasn't nervous. He was excited. Drake appeared beside him, arms crossed. They're expecting us to fold. Ethan nodded. Yeah. They've done this before. They think we'll scatter, that we'll panic, that we'll negotiate. Drake smirked. They don't know what they've just walked into. Ethan's voice was steady. They're about to find out. The Orzak fleet advanced with brutal efficiency. Thousands of warships, ranging from swift attack frigates to planet-cracking dreadnoughts, formed a relentless wall of firepower. They had subjugated over 100 worlds before this. Earth was just another name on their list. Or so they thought. High Warlord Zovok stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Zarvok, watching as Earth's defenses prepared to meet their fate. Primitive. That was the only word for them. The humans had crude orbital stations, outdated missile batteries, and a ragtag fleet that barely qualified as a military force. Against the Orzak war machine, they were nothing more than insects. He turned to his weapons officer. Open fire. Burn their defenses. Crush their arrogance. The order was given. 1,000 Orzak warships unleashed their first volley, a blinding storm of plasma torpedoes and hyperkinetic rail slugs. The void itself seemed to ignite as the barrage hurtled toward Earth's orbital stations. Zovaka's mandibles curled in satisfaction. This war would be over before the humans could even scream. The first surprise. Admiral Ethan Graves stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, watching the incoming barrage. His hands remained steady. His expression didn't change. This was the moment the Orzak would realize they'd made a mistake. The second their weapons entered range, Earth's defenses activated. Not with missiles. Not with energy shields. With something far worse. Trigger the graveyard protocol, Ethan ordered. A single command. And space itself came alive. From seemingly empty void, thousands of autonomous drone swarms burst into action. Each was no larger than a shoebox, barely detectable, and equipped with advanced electronic warfare suites. Within seconds, the Orzak fleet's targeting systems flickered. Missile guidance failed. Plasma torpedoes veered off course. Rail slugs struck nothing. The Orzak had assumed Earth was weak. They had assumed human defenses were primitive. They had assumed war was simple. They had assumed wrong. "Sir," a technician reported, barely containing his grin. "Their targeting matrix is scrambled. They're firing blind." Ethan's smirk widened. "Now let's return the favor." Earth's counterattack. The void erupted with human firepower. From behind Earth's shadow, hidden deep within orbital debris fields, the real fleet emerged. No outdated relics. No obsolete tech. These were warships built for one purpose: total destruction. Railguns ignited, sending hypervelocity rounds at relativistic speeds straight through Orzak hulls. Electromagnetic pulse missiles detonated, frying entire battle networks. Stealth bombers deployed high-yield plasma charges, tearing enemy capital ships apart in a chain reaction of death. The Orzak fleet staggered. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The humans weren't scattering in fear. They weren't running. They were fighting back. And they were winning. On the Zarvok, Warlord Zovaka's 8 crimson eyes widened in rage. "What is this?" A lieutenant trembled. "Sire, their technology, it is not primitive." The realization hit like a hammer. They had been tricked. The nightmare begins. Deep within Earth's military command, President Vasquez watched the battle unfold. The Orzak were still adapting, but that wouldn't last long. They needed a message. Something to break the invaders' will before they could rally. She turned to Captain Helena Drake. "Deploy the Spartans." Drake's eyes gleamed. "With pleasure, ma'am." Within moments, the first wave of Spartan strike teams launched. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were monsters in human form. Genetically enhanced, cybernetically augmented, and trained in warfare so brutal even the Orzak would hesitate. And they were already inside the enemy fleet. As the first Spartan teams breached Orzak vessels, the aliens learned their second horrifying lesson. Humans didn't just fight. Humans hunted. Terror spreads. Aboard the Orzak battleship Kruvelk, Commander Vaktal had no time to react before the first human warriors arrived. The bulkhead exploded inward. And then they came. Towering figures clad in dark armor, their eyes burning with an unnatural glow. They moved like wraiths, faster than anything the Orzak had ever seen. The first Spartan tackled an Orzak soldier and ripped his head from his body. Another hurled a grenade down the corridor, reducing a squad to paste. Vaktal tried to issue an order. He barely opened his mandibles before a massive gauntlet hand seized his throat and lifted him off the ground. The last thing he saw was a human helmet, expressionless, unfeeling. Then the Spartan crushed his skull like an insect. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Orzak warriors, known for their brutality, found themselves facing an enemy far worse. An enemy that enjoyed the fight. Panic spread. It started as whispers, then screams, then full-fledged terror. High Warlord Zovak clenched his claws as the battle reports poured in. Boarded. Ship lost. Crew wiped out. Ow. Ow. His voice thundered across the bridge. What kind of creatures are these humans? The answer came in the form of a direct message, broadcast straight to his ship. Admiral Ethan Graves appeared on his command screen, arms crossed. His voice was calm. Deadly. "You wanted submission?" He leaned in slightly. "You should have done your research." Zovaka's mandibles twitched in fury. "We are the Orzak. We do not." "You will kneel," Ethan interrupted. "Or you will burn." The war had only just begun. And already the Orzak were losing. High Warlord Zovaka's claws dug into the metal railing of his flagship's command bridge. The battle was turning into a nightmare. It had started as a routine invasion. A simple conquest of a primitive world. The humans should have been crushed beneath Orzak firepower. Their defenses should have crumbled. Their leaders should have begged. Instead, the Orzak fleet was dying. Earth's counterattack was more than just resistance. It was systematic extermination. Zovak's 8 eyes burned with fury as he turned toward his second-in-command. Where are the reinforcements? The officer, his mandibles trembling, hesitated. Our Karnath battle groups are still 3 cycles away. The humans? He swallowed hard. They're pushing us back. Zovak let out a guttural snarl. That was impossible. Orzak warriors did not retreat. Their fleets did not lose. And yet, all around him, ships were breaking formation, commanders were panicking, and distress calls were flooding in. The humans were relentless. They fought with precision, with fury, with a sheer hunger for destruction that was unnatural. And the worst part? They were enjoying it. The wolves unleashed. Aboard the Valkyrie, Admiral Ethan Graves watched as his Spartans tore through Orzak warships like a pack of rabid wolves. The enemy fleet was in full disarray. Their lines had shattered, their cohesion was gone, and their confidence was bleeding out with every dead warlord and burning battleship. He turned to Captain Helena Drake. Time for the finishing move. She grinned. Deploying the Revenants now. Across the battlefield, a new nightmare emerged. Stealth corvettes, black as the void, suddenly decloaked behind Orzak dreadnoughts. Their payloads weren't missiles or plasma torpedoes. They were boarding pods. And inside each one? The Revenant Corps. Where Spartans were human tanks, unstoppable, overwhelming, the Revenants were something else entirely. Ghosts. Assassins. They didn't charge into battle. They appeared in the middle of it. And before the Orzak could even scream, they were gone. Within minutes, entire warships were going dark. Crews were being butchered before they even knew they were under attack. Zovak watched in horror as the Zarvok's fleet crumbled. A cold, unfamiliar feeling gripped his chest. He had never known fear. But now he was learning. The negotiation. His tactical officer turned toward him, mandibles clicking in terror. Sire, we must retreat. Zovak turned and snapped his neck. Cowards did not lead the Orzak. But as he turned back to the holoscreen, another transmission came through. The human admiral was calling him. Again. With a deep growl, Zovak accepted the link. The human's face appeared, calm and unreadable. Ethan Graves tilted his head. You look like a man with regrets. Zovak bared his fangs. You think you've won? Ethan's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're still breathing, which means you haven't fully learned your lesson yet. He leaned in. But don't worry. We're patient. Zovak slammed a clawed fist into the console. You cannot win. You may have surprised us, but we are Orzak. We will bring our full might upon you. You cannot possibly stand against. Ethan cut him off. You still don't get it, do you? His voice was deadly quiet. We aren't here to negotiate. We aren't here to surrender. He leaned forward, his expression turning to stone. We're here to make an example out of you. The transmission cut. And that's when the humans unleashed hell. Fire and blood. Across the battlefield, Earth's warships broke their calculated precision and charged. This was no longer strategy. This was execution. Cruisers rammed into Orzak battleships, unleashing point-blank kinetic bombardments that ripped hulls apart. Dreadnoughts fired orbital lances that boiled enemy ships from the inside. Swarms of combat drones overwhelmed defenses, cutting through crews like locusts. And in the midst of it all, the Spartans and Revenants continued their slaughter. Entire ships went silent as human forces wiped them clean. Orzak warriors, famous for their brutality, died screaming. Zovak felt something inside him break. His warriors weren't fighting anymore. They were running. Scrambling for escape pods. Sending desperate distress calls. It was over. It wasn't just a defeat. It was a massacre. The last stand. As fire raged across the Zarvok, Zovak stood at the center of his bridge, his claws trembling. He could hear the Spartans coming. They were already inside his ship. His last officers were dead. His fleet was burning. His empire would never recover from this. The humans had shattered it in a single battle. The bridge doors blew apart. And then the monster stepped through. A squad of Spartans, their black armor streaked with Orzak blood. The leader stepped forward. His helmet retracted, revealing cold blue eyes. Zovak bared his fangs. Do it. Finish me. The Spartan tilted his head. Then to Zovak's shock, he tossed a blade at his feet. Pick it up. Zovak hesitated. The human smiled. You wanted war. His voice was almost amused. You wanted a fight. He stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Let's see if you're worth killing. Zovok stared at the blade at his feet. A human had just tossed it to him. Mockery. No, worse than that. It was pity. The Orzak warlord's mandibles trembled with rage. The bridge of his burning flagship reeked of death. His officers were gone. His fleet was reduced to wreckage. The humans had carved through his armada like a goddamn storm. And now this Spartan wanted him to fight? To die like some primitive gladiator? Zovok's claws flexed. No. If he was going to die, he was going to take one of these monsters with him. He lunged. The Spartan barely moved. His gauntlet hand snapped up, caught Zovok's wrist mid-strike and twisted. A sickening pop echoed through the bridge. Zovok's blade clattered to the floor as his arm was wrenched back at an impossible angle. Pain erupted through his body. The Spartan yanked him forward, kneeing him in the abdomen. Zovok crumpled. His vision swam. His lungs spasmed. The humans were stronger than they looked. Faster than they should be. He had fought 100 duels. Won all of them. This wasn't a duel. This was a demonstration. Get up, the Spartan said coldly. Zovok coughed up a glob of dark blood. Why, he spat. The Spartan's eyes, human yet utterly alien, stared down at him. Because, he said simply, you started this war thinking you were predators. He leaned down, grabbing Zovok by the throat. Now you understand you're not predators. His grip tightened. You're prey. Zovok tried to strike. Tried to struggle. It was useless. The Spartan dragged him to the viewport, forcing him to look. The battlefield was dead. Orzak warships had been annihilated. Escape pods drifted aimlessly, their occupants surrendering to the void. Earth's warships remained. Untouched. The Valkyrie stood at the center of it all, its cannons still smoldering. A victory total and absolute. Zovok's heart sank. The Orzak Empire would never recover from this. The humans hadn't just won. They had made it impossible for the Orzak to ever rise again. His body trembled with rage, grief, and something far worse. Fear. A warning written in blood. The Spartan finally released him. Zovok crumpled to the floor, gasping. The other Spartans stood silently, their visors unreadable. Then, from Zovok's own command console, a transmission flared to life. The human admiral was calling again. Zovok's mandibles clicked weakly. He was defeated. What more could they possibly want? The Spartan nodded toward the console. Answer it. With shaking claws, Zovok obeyed. Ethan Graves' face flickered onto the screen. High Warlord Zovok. Zovok said nothing. Graves continued. You wanted Earth. You thought we'd kneel. That we'd pay for our own people. His expression darkened. But here's the thing, Zovok, we don't do ransom payments. A beat of silence. Then, in a voice like cold steel, Graves delivered humanity's final warning. The next species that comes for us? He leaned forward. They don't get a war. They don't get a battle. He let the words settle. They just stop existing. The transmission cut. Zovok felt his soul shatter. It was over. The Orzak Empire was finished. And the galaxy had just learned a lesson written in blood. Aftermath, the fall of an empire. The surviving Orzak were gathered. Prisoners. Defeated warriors. Fractured fleets. Humanity did not enslave them. Did not integrate them. Did not offer them terms. The humans simply left them. A broken people with no future. The Orzak homeworld, once the seat of power, became a graveyard of dying warlords. Infighting consumed what was left. Starvation and anarchy followed. So, the Orzak simply faded. Like prey that had learned, too late, they were never the hunters. Final transmission from Earth. To the galaxy, a single message was sent. A simple warning. Earth is off limits. And no one, ever dared to test them again. Fire, if you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe for more stories of humanity proving why we're the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Fire.